love to introduce my panel. We were going to keep it simple and do the one-line introduction. So first we have Bill Mark, who is the President of Information and Computing Sciences at SRI International. Hi, Bill. We have Karen Meyers, who is the Director of the AI Lab also at SRI International. And we have Sasha Caskey, who is the co-founder and chief technology officer of Kasisto, which is a spin-off company from SRI Ventures, which is our ventures arm of SRI International. So I have the pleasure and the honor of working with these forces behind artificial intelligence, Bill and Karen directly, and of course Sasha also through Kasisto, one of our spin-off companies. Would you like to give a little more of a brief introduction of yourself, since I think we went beyond the one line?
Is this on? Yes, thank you. Yes, so I am the President of Information and Computing Sciences at SRI International. For those of you who don't know, SRI is a nonprofit research and development company. It was founded by Stanford University, but has been independent now for 40-something years. And the Information Computing Sciences group is about 250 people. Almost all of them work in artificial intelligence these days.
Good morning, I'm Karen Meyers. As Reenita said, I'm the director of our AI lab. We do kind of the full complement of research and development in the AI space, including natural language processing, text analytics, computer vision, machine learning everywhere, planning and scheduling, intelligent personal assistants, pretty much the full range.
Thank you, Karen. Hi, my name's Sasha Caskey. I'm a co-founder and CTO for Kasisto. At Kasisto, we consider ourselves one of the leaders in conversational AI for finance and banking. We came out of SRI a few years ago, and since then we've been specializing our AI in conversations to help users get by with their day-to-day banking problems.
All right, thank you. And for those of you who are not aware of SRI International, we are a science and deep tech research institute in Silicon Valley, really a pioneer in this space in Silicon Valley, which is why we have these forces behind AI and several other technologies. But focusing on AI at this specific conference, this conference really covering the gamut of artificial intelligence. So focusing on conversational intelligence or conversation, I'd like to ask our panel members what that really means. What is conversational intelligence? Why is it important or necessary? Bill, would you like to start?
I think as human beings, we all have an idea of what conversation is, because conversation is one of the fundamental human capabilities. If you think about how you solve problems in the real world, my guess is you interact with other people, and the primary means you use is conversation. And of course, traditionally, that's spoken interaction, which is something we're going to be talking quite a bit about here. But these days we would also include conversation via text messaging, starting to stretch it a little bit, maybe conversation via email. But conversation is an interactive process in which two or more people, or perhaps a person and a virtual assistant, work together to solve some kind of problem. That's what I would say conversation is about.
Karen, would you like to add to that at all?
Yeah, maybe I'll address the question of why this is important. So there is the notion of convenience to facilitate people interacting with systems. And I think that's really important because we're now starting to see emerging with some of the more advanced AI technologies that we're starting to see situations where humans working collaboratively with AI technologies is enabling much better performance than either what the humans can do on their own or what the AI technologies can do on their own. So a great example of this is in the area of chess, where there was this very interesting result showing that an amateur chess player using an AI-enabled chess assistant tool was able to defeat a range of grandmasters and also to perform better than the AI tool on its own. And so to really facilitate humans working effectively with the AI technologies, I think this whole area of conversational AI is a really critical one.
So Sasha, in banking or in fintech specifically, is conversational AI important?
Well, we believe it is at Kasisto. In fact, we have systems in about 7 different countries, and when we asked our customers who deployed this technology what was the main reason for them choosing us, they came back to somewhat of a surprise, and they spoke about engagement. It was really important to them to change how they are engaging with their customers. As we spend more and more time interacting with our devices, online, there's a certain humanity that we want to bring back, and we feel that offering our products and services in a human-like way kind of allows with that.
So the question then is, can we really and truly train a computer to talk to us like a human? Karen, can you tell us a little bit about the challenges of human-like interaction?
Sure, I think there are a number of challenges, but we're also making significant progress on these challenges in the field. So if you think about the first generation voice or language-based assistants, they were kind of focused on one-off interactions, right? You could ask Siri, put something on my calendar, or book this restaurant, do something like that. But to get to true conversational AI, you really got to think longer term, right? You're thinking about a whole series of interactions, and they're not just a collection of independent sub-interactions. You really have to think of them as a coherent whole. So context becomes very important. So for example, if I wanted to ask my conversational assistant, where's the closest theater where the Spider-Man movie is playing? And it comes back and tells me, and then I want to say, is there a pizza restaurant near there? Right? Understanding that there refers to the movie theater where the Spider-Man movie is playing. So that's just a very simple example of very local context, but more generally, if you're having an ongoing conversation, you need for your conversational assistant to understand the history of the interactions that the person has had with the assistant, and also understanding kind of the overall goal. What is the purpose of this interaction? What is the human trying to achieve through the conversation that he or she is having with the assistant?
Bill, are there other examples you can think of? For example, do I need to learn how to talk to a computer in a certain way, or will it adjust to me?
Well, first, let me just underscore one of the points that Karen just made about the computer system needs to understand the goal of what the user, the person, is trying to accomplish. Because so I just have to stress that human beings have spectacular conversational capability. It's something that we've evolved over time, so it's something obviously very important to us in society. One example of that is, and I encourage you to listen to the conversations that you have with people and see whether when you ask a question, they actually answer the question or ask you a different question or something like that. So to take an example from Sasha's domain, Kasisto, suppose you walk into a bank and say, I want to transfer $100 into checking, and the teller says, do you want to take that out of savings? And you say, well, how much do I have in savings? So you may or may not have noticed that when I said, how much do I have in savings, that was not an answer to the question. And I guarantee you that if you take any of the commonly available systems out there, like Siri, which spun out of SRI, out of the lab Karen runs, the system will absolutely crater on that. It does not understand that that question is relevant to your overall goal, which happens to be transferring money from one account to another. So I'm just saying this because this stuff is pretty subtle. Now, to Reenita's question, do human beings need to adapt to the way they interact with computers? Certainly right now, absolutely yes. We've all learned what Siri can deal with and what Siri can't deal with, and we act accordingly. But we as a field, and Sasha should actually talk about this for Kasisto, are trying to make it so that that's not true, so that you can talk to the system the way you want to and it will understand you and do the right thing.
So Sasha, as we were talking earlier this morning, you mentioned something which I think is quite important, and that is that many lay people don't necessarily want to talk about money matters with their bank, but they might be comfortable texting about this.
That's right. We felt, and this is validated by some of the experiments that we've run at Kasisto, that when we first started Kasisto, I was telling Reenita, it was a fully conversational system. It would start, you press a button, and you start saying, hey, you know, what's my cash position? How am I doing with my money? Can I afford this or that? And we noticed that people were shy when they were talking. I mean, they could go and talk to their system to turn on lights or turn them off or play this song. But when it came down to discussing your finances and if there are other people in the room, it just, or if you're in a bus or in a bar, you don't want to necessarily have to hear all your finances broadcast to everyone. And you know, slowly but surely they would come back and kind of have this hushed, quiet chat conversation. So at some point we made that the primary mode of interacting with our chatbots and services. So yes, I believe, and you know, I think this will be changing in time. I see my kids and they don't even know that they can go on their phone and change settings. They just say, hey Siri, turn on low power mode. I'm like, what? So, you know, maybe they will be more comfortable, but I think today there's still a certain level of anxiety.
Well, one thing that we do know is that the world of virtual assistants is certainly growing. We see more and more evidence of people interacting with virtual assistants. Bill, I'd like to ask you, will we reach a stage where virtual assistants become so human-like that we, on this end of the computer, actually don't know who we're dealing with, meaning human or computer?
Personally, I hope not. I think, so there's two questions. One, is it technically achievable? And then the other is it something that we want to do? So I actually think that it's technically achievable. I've already seen experiments in which it comes quite close and it's actually hard to tell. But I think it's important that we keep that distinction because I said a little while ago that conversation is this very fundamental human capability. There's also there's something important about connection and emotion and empathy that human beings have with each other, even over the phone, even when you're talking to a human, you know, customer representative, that for a long time is going to be hard to achieve in a computer system. So I think that the virtual assistant should always make clear that it's a virtual assistant. It's very easy to do. Say, you know, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm a virtual assistant. I think that's the right thing to do.
What do you think, Karen, as you develop your systems in your labs, is the emphasis on training the virtual assistant to be more human-like, not just in terms of sound, but in terms of behavior?
Yeah, to some extent that's important, right? That people feel more comfortable dealing with a system that is like them. But I'll second Bill's point that this notion of being able to differentiate between what is a real and what is a virtual assistant is really important, and is something that's going to be critical, I think, for people to be willing to embrace the technology, to know that they will always have that differentiation, to understand when they're dealing with a human versus non-human assistant.
Now, Karen, when we think about a virtual assistant and the purpose of a virtual assistant. Usually I'm thinking in a very narcissistic way. It's about me and my virtual assistant and what he or she can do for me. But in the real world, there are other virtual assistants which need to serve other people. So are we talking about a situation where one virtual assistant can work with the other virtual assistant and really achieve all the user's tasks? Is this possible?
So it's possible. I think we're a ways away from that, though. So if you think about, where are we using AI techniques where we have that kind of distributed coordination of different agents? One example that comes to mind is something like smart scheduling tools, right? So I've got my constraints, you've got your constraints on your calendar. Our scheduling agents are looking at those, they're negotiating, and they're coming back and they're proposing a time for a meeting for us. That's a pretty focused task, and if the system gets it wrong, which they don't do that often because it is such a simple task, there's still the possibility of recovering. But I think having our intelligent agents as delegates for us, off doing more open-ended tasks, we're still a ways away from that. But it's an interesting question to see whether we could get to the point where we would actually trust the agents to go off and sort of work amongst themselves on our behalf to accomplish tasks for us.
Yeah, Bill, please.
So just to add to that, Reenita was saying that we think of personal assistants as representing us. I'd like to present a little bit of a different point of view, because if you look at systems like the ones that Kasisto builds, and some of the other ones you see out there representing, for example, retail companies, I think there's a very good analogy to life in the physical world. When you walk into a bank or you walk into a store and you interact with someone, you fully expect them to be representing the bank. They're there to help you, and you actually expect them to help you in an honest way, but they're not representing you, they're representing the bank. That's why I said earlier the conversation is about two entities working together to solve a problem. You assume that the person in the bank knows more about banking than you do and can help you navigate some things in the bank. And you interact with them fully expecting them to do things that are good for you, but also good for the bank.
Sasha, just if we could explore that point a little bit further with a view to the banking world, are there situations where you have one bank which has one kind of conversational system, another bank which has another kind of conversational system, and they clash? Does that happen?
I guess that could happen, but I think the problem that you're bringing up is one that we see today, even though, as Karen says, it's not necessarily something that people are trying to solve actively, which is as conversational agents become more prevalent, they start becoming more specialized. And even, you don't even have to look across banks. You can look inside of a bank, right? So a bank has different lines of businesses that they serve, looking at different customers. So one bank will have a retail banking line of business, and that has one specialty and one set of products and services. Then they might have a business banking or a wealth management or an investment management. All of those are slightly different. They usually will go to different portals or in different applications to use those services. But when you're talking about a virtual assistant, it feels a little strange to go from one virtual, it's okay for you to go from one website to another website, right? From your business banking to your consumer banking. But if I'm talking to someone, and even transferring, you get transferred from one agent to another. But often the way we think of the conversational agents, we want to go to one agent and we want them to be specialists in everything. And the reality is probably going to look something a little bit different than that, where the agents will get specialized in certain behaviors. And then you'll need agents to connect you with the other agents, even the virtual ones. So that's sort of how we see the world today.
Right. But it seems quite normal. For example, if I'm going to call a company on the phone, invariably, I will talk with a sales specialist who's a generalist, not a specialist, who will then connect me to the specialist about subject A, who will then connect me to the specialist about subject B. And yes, you're right, that does drive me crazy. But it is the way they are trained. So wouldn't we expect the same? of virtual assistants?
You know, and that's where we're going to see where this is going to land. I think it's too early to make a prediction. You could make one argument on the side of, well, this is an AI. I can keep teaching it new things. So now I don't need to have these subject experts anymore. My AI is a multi-subject expert and it can solve my business banking, consumer banking, or investment needs. One AI, it's got it all. You could see another world where the AIs are speaking to each other and there's some sort of managing AI. So you come in and you say, look, you know, I would like to find out my cash position. It goes back to all the other AIs and says, hey, I have someone here who wants information about their cash position. One AI says, oh, I got that. And it goes and services that customer. And you could have it changing per utterance. So this is more of a network of AIs functioning together. So it just depends how you slice and dice the problem.
Bill, you were nodding. What do you think about this one-size-fits-all AI versus specialization?
I think Sasha was covering it in that it depends on the desired human experience. So I'm going to go away from what's technologically possible again. As you were pointing out, in real life, we're not used to that kind of interaction. We're used to somebody who's specialized in a particular area, and as you said, being perhaps directed toward that person. It happens all the time. Oh, I'll have to connect you with someone in the hardware department. That's the way we're used to interacting. And unless we want to change that paradigm radically, that's my guess as to how virtual assistants will evolve.
So Sasha, I'd like to ask you, what makes for a really good virtual assistant? In the real world, practical application.
So that's a great question. And I feel there's so many different ways at looking at it, right? From a technological perspective, from a usability perspective, from a business perspective, right? From a business, they're looking, a great virtual assistant is one that goes out there and helps the business. It helps the business serve its customers. It shows clear value to the business in a measurable way so that the business can understand, you know, since I put this technology out there, I'm saving this much money here, I'm making this much money there, and my customers are oh so satisfied, right? So that's one way of looking at what makes a successful conversational. From the user's perspective, right? I want something that's pleasant, that doesn't take me too long to learn how to speak to it. And I want something that is helpful to me. I personally get frustrated if I try to go use a virtual assistant or even a website and I ask a question and it just gives me links to pages that just give me more questions and then more questions, and I feel like I never get my question actually answered or my problem actually resolved. So I feel that virtual assistants that get me to a resolution of whatever it is that I want are a successful deployment.
Karen, are we thinking through all of these potential problems even in the lab as we're developing this AI?
And definitely people are thinking about all these issues. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting work going on right now. So for example, relevant to this question of evaluation and how well we're doing, I've seen a few papers recently that are trying to use machine learning to do this ongoing assessment. So analyzing the conversations and the interaction patterns and being able to identify in an unsupervised way where the assistant technology has gone off the tracks, where it hasn't done what it needed to do. So this is going to be a really important capability to develop because of the inherent cost of putting together the underlying knowledge, the underlying models that drive a conversational assistant, and getting to the point where we can have these systems be sufficiently self-aware, where they understand their deficiencies, where they have trouble communicating effectively with the humans, and learning from those mistakes so they can improve their conversational models over time.
Bill, anything to add before we open up for questions?
Well, again, I think that human beings are really good at this. I've said this a number of times, but just take the kinds of things that Karen was talking about. One thing that a good conversation-aware human being does is they understand when their current approach, their current conversational approach isn't working, and they'll move to something else. They'll start asking questions, or they'll say, do you have any questions? We're very adroit at doing that. We don't have computer systems that come anywhere close to that yet. although that's certainly something we'd like to be able to do. That's the kind of self-awareness that Karen was talking about.
Well, I'd love to keep asking you all more questions, but I would love to give the audience a chance to have their voices heard. Does anybody have any questions for any of our panelists?
So it was kind of first of all, great talk. Are you doing anything with children? It seems like there's a huge opportunity with young children that are just learning to speak or just learning to do something specific, and so I'm just anything with children.
We actually, SRI has a number of different divisions. It's very multidisciplinary. And we have an education group that specializes in K through 12 education. So we're doing experiments now to try to assess collaboration in the classroom. And we're also looking at how teachers, here are very small children, interact with the kids, because there's education research that shows that if the teacher asks more open-ended questions and has a very friendly manner, that it has huge educational value for the young children. So the answer is yes.
Another question?
Yeah, just to indicate where I'm coming from, I'm running the conversational interaction track tomorrow afternoon here at the conference. So one of the things I've noticed that seems to me very critical is that companies like Amazon with Alexa and Google with Google Assistant, to a lesser extent Apple, Siri, and companies in China with similar intents, are building these general purpose digital assistants that do try to do everything. They're not very conversational yet, but they do try to answer almost any question you ask, and they're connecting with companies. That's a major thing. Amazon calls them skills, Google calls them actions, and they build whole toolkits to help companies, let them contact with companies. So you can ask big bank, what's my account balance? In theory, Amazon or Alexa or Google Assistant will just answer your question because they go out and access these skills. So you're talking indirectly to a bank. It seems to me that that's a new sort of, they're competing to be a new access, web access that way, both to information and to companies. So you don't go to a website, you just ask to talk to a company. It seems to me that's going to drive every company to need a company-specific digital assistant. I wonder if you believe that's the case, almost like needing a website.
Sasha, would you like to address that?
I hope that's the case. We certainly see that, right? And obviously there's a lot to consider when we look into this. Obviously there's a difference between putting out public information and making that accessible through a virtual assistant. When you start looking at private information or sensitive information like your accounts and your transactions, then regulation and the institutions themselves are a lot more cautious as to who they give access to that. They want to understand where you're storing that data, how it's being protected, and usually when they apply those controls, things like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft kind of are not able to satisfy them. So within the financial industry, at least, there are certain controls that make it harder for the banks to just broadly adopt that. But I do agree that one sort or another of opening up content to a conversational interface is, I predict will continue to grow as a need into one day maybe like a phone number or a website. Every company has one.
Just one thing to add, certainly I completely agree that that's a trend we see and is becoming pervasive. I'll just say that because of the state of the technology, the ability to create deeply conversational systems using this kind of mechanism doesn't exist yet. As Bill was saying, they're not very conversational yet. So what we see is a proliferation of valuable but rather shallow conversational systems built in this way.
Another question?
So, William, earlier you made a comment about us speaking to a technology and the technology understanding us versus us learning to speak to the technology the way that it understands. And then later, Sasha made a comment about, you know, your kid interacts with Siri in a way that maybe you or I wouldn't, because probably we've tried it in the past and it didn't work then, so why would it now? So the question is, as these technologies evolve, how do we think, or what do you think about how it interacts with us to let us know that that is there, so that, you know, beyond the naivety of a child, we take advantage of it?
Yeah, that is indeed a great question. So this is a situation in which both sides are learning. So the human beings learn what they can say that works. The system, especially if you're looking at a pervasive thing like Siri, is collecting all of the interactions that this huge number of people have and is constantly learning how to handle new interactions. So both sides are evolving. You were getting to the point of, how does the system indicate that you can ask a certain kind of question, etc. None of the systems I've seen are really good at that. Human beings do that by introducing new topics, suggesting questions, modeling a certain kind of interaction. We're not there yet, but that's a really great research problem in my view.
Do we have time for just 2 more questions? Scott, yes? One more question.
Hi, my question is actually a follow-up to the question just before me. As we depend on AI and for querying a lot of our financial data, health information, have anyone or you aware of any organizations are looking into, for example, continuous authentication of who is the machine's talking to? As the person answers the phone, they recognize, hey, the voice of the person that authenticate, the prior question is no longer on the phone, someone else is asking the question now. What technology do we have in that area?
Well, I guess I'll take a try at that. So at SRI and a lot of other places, the technology of authentication is something we work on quite a bit. You mentioned recognition of the speaker through speech. That's an area that has been going on for at least the past 20 years and can produce some really spectacular results using all kinds of characteristics of the tone, the manner, the vocabulary, all can identify who it is that's speaking. And if that can then be combined with visual information, it's even more powerful.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you to the audience for coming. If you did have a question for either Bill or Karen or Sasha or all of them, I can vouch that they will be sticking around for just a bit longer. So feel free to chat with them in the foyer, and hope to see you again. Thank you.